Hello and welcome to the Mysticast, where you join Jack Stafford and Debra Littleboyce, members of the Aetherius Society, the cosmic religion for the Aquarian Age, as we break down the barriers between religion, science, metaphysics, philosophy, and mysticism, all of which are really only aspects of the self-same quest for truth. Please note, this is an independent program, not produced or fact-checked by the Aetherius Society. Today, our guest is Wayne Salmon. Hello, Wayne.
Hello, Jack and Debra. How are you both?
Hi. Good, thanks. Really good.
Good.
Feeling very good to have such an intellectual heavy hitter as yourself come on the show.
Well, I appreciate those kind words for starters.
And so rather than try to field any intellectual questions, which we could hope to catch you out with, maybe it's best to start with, because our audience is mostly members and sympathizers of the Aetherius Society. You've had some time now, a couple of weeks, to get into the Aetherius Society, which you hadn't heard about before. What are your impressions?
My impressions are excellent. I purchased The Nine Freedoms by George King. Excellent. And I read your Aetherius link about what society stands for and what it believes in and so forth. And I absolutely find everything really excellent. Like me, the Aetherius Society is clearly an East-West amalgamation and open to spiritual traditions and knowledge from all around the globe, I would say.
That's a perfect way to describe it, yeah.
Yeah, and I like all the concepts that I read, and I'm very much in tune and resonate with them. So,
okay, we can end the interview there then. Did the book arrive yet? Did you read it, or is it still in there? Did you finish the Nine Freedoms?
Oh, that. Yes, I did. I did.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's, I mean, George King is clearly an incredible person who reached levels that most of us are still aspiring toward. And it strikes me that he was an exceptional yogi, and I understand about the Kundalini and how important that is. And he made that the very central issue in the book, that was the absolute most essential thing or aspect of the whole endeavor. So I appreciate that. I am not at his level. I'll tell you that from the beginning. But I thought, what can I contribute perhaps to those who are in the society? And maybe it's good to read somebody who's at an intermediate level and has had a lot of experiences, but not at the level of George King. But he's a very inspiring individual, and so I can see why he's had such a profound effect on so many.
Well, I'll get you a membership card in the post then.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant to hear. That's music to our ears, because obviously Debra and I found the society in different ways at different times, but it's pretty nice to, have it affirmed, because it's a tall ask for many people to believe in UFOs, to believe in life on other planets, to believe in karma and reincarnation, and how that, if you extrapolate that out, if we're in a reincarnatory cycle, that must have a beginning and an end, no? And where does that go? And as it explains, if it goes to other classrooms in other planets, that's at a different frequency of vibration. That's somewhere that tallies with it's logical. No, otherwise, if we're at the peak of our evolution and there's no other planets inhabited, kind of begs the question what they're there for.
Yes, indeed. It's a massive universe out there. And to just think that we are the only form of life, or intelligent life, I should say, in the universe is just beggars belief, It makes no sense. So, yeah, I find myself, I've always been very open to the idea that there is life all throughout the cosmos, and intelligent life. And I like the whole concept of vibration, because I think that's probably how it does work, in that there are so many perhaps infinite levels of vibration to where there are planes or domains of existence which are full of life forms who are not human necessarily, or perhaps they're post-human or pre-human.
Exactly.
So yeah, it can all work. But I've studied very deeply into Western mysticism, Hermeticism, and so forth, but also Buddhism, Hinduism, Lao Tzu and the Tao. All that is right in line with what you're teaching, with what George King says and teaches.
All right, I'm gonna have to stop. I'm getting a bit emotional here, so I have to bring in Debra here.
Can I step in? With all those studies, what made you decide to write fictional books that will bring that in? Is it to make it more palatable for people like me to start to get a grapple on what's really happening, to put it into an easier, digestible format, a suggestive? Really.
Well, to write like my book, The Journey Across Forever, which is my new book, which is nonfiction. Like you have to be at a certain level to put yourself out there and say things of a metaphysical nature with any kind of confidence. As a younger person, I always felt that inner knowledge was there, but to hold oneself up, as any kind of person who others should listen to, like you need a lot of life experience. And I think it's life experience that translates into wisdom. And so I found it less pressurizing to ease into it with fiction. And, I just wasn't ready to hold myself up at the point I'm at now in my life, which I'm pleased to say, like, when I was in my 60s, things just all seemed to gel and come together and synthesize into a certain perception, which really I could finally take firm confidence in and say, this is what I've learned. This is what experience has taught me. This is what traveling the world has given me, and so forth, like to bring it all together into a coherent whole. And The Journey Across Forever, this book brings all of that life experience into what I believe is a coherent whole. And I tried to streamline all this information that I had learned, because if you're like me, like you've read hundreds of books and you're trying to put it all together, there are so many divergent viewpoints in the world. And you have to sort through it, let's say. And it's time that tests every theory until you finally settle, you know what, this is what makes sense to me. So I tried to write all of this information in an entertaining way, because people don't want academic kind of writing. Like typically when they go in the bookstore, they're not going to go into the academic section and read this sort of thing. So I didn't want to come across in an academic way. I wanted to speak from the heart, and that's the big thing. And there's a lot of life adventures and some paranormal things that occurred, some UFOs. Dream yoga was a huge thing with me. And it's my journey began really with flying dreams when I was very young. And, some people say this is perhaps out-of-body experiences where you're in another realm. The vibration is higher level and you're, in a sort of an anti-gravity sense, flying through this
when we sleep, yeah.
other realm.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jack.
We mostly project. You can't sleep without projection, apparently. Dr. King said so.
Yeah. So anyway, these flying dreams led to my first novel, which was a fiction, and it's called The Dream Illuminati. So I talk about, or I have a fictional group that actually tries to live their dreams of flying, and they are seeking illumination at the same time. So this word Illuminati has some very ambiguous meanings to people. Some fear it and think it's all about elites taking advantage of us and controlling the masses and all that. There's a lot of conspiracy around it. But I think true illumination, true Illuminati would be beings like George King, who are interested in enlightenment and helping, and as it says on your website, selfless service to others. All of that is true spirituality. It's not about trying to amass a fortune for yourself and controlling other people, using them to your own ends and so forth. So I tried to make it exciting. So that was the first book, The Dream Illuminati. And there's been
wonderful
four
reviews
since.
as well. Robert Anton Wilson, Timothy Leary.
Yeah.
You've really got a great reception with that book.
Yeah. Robert Anton Wilson kindly wrote the introduction. And in this book, The Journey Across Forever, I have Colonel John Alexander, who wrote the foreword. And if those are who might be familiar with Colonel Alexander, he's a major player in the paranormal UFO field. He's associated with Robert Bigelow and Skinwalker Ranch, and he wrote a book on UFOs, which is quite intriguing and is what really brought me into contact with him. I was so impressed with his book. And another one of his books is called Reality Denied: Firsthand Experiences with Things That Can't Happen But Did. And that's where I have some of those experiences, like, can this really happen? And of course, when it does, then you have to say, well, this is what I experienced. So,
Well, it's
Are
wonderful
you
to
going
have
to
you.
share a couple? Sorry, Jack. Are you
I was
going
just
to
gonna
share
say-
a couple of those experiences with us then,
Yes.
Wayne?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. I think the one that, there's two that kind of have been the most, brought the most excitement in their wake. When I was around 10 or 11 years old, I was playing ball in the front yard of our home in Ohio. So I'm from Ohio. And I was playing ball with my brother. We were just throwing a ball back and forth in the front yard. And this was the middle of the day, sunshine, not a cloud in the sky, when suddenly over the top of our house from the back came this round flying disc. And it wasn't your typical flying saucer. It was more like a round, silver, silent shuttlecraft, because it was a flat disc with a railing around it. And at the back were two people, a man and a woman, very handsome couple. And they were standing at the back rail. And we looked up at them. They looked down at us. We waved at them. They waved at us. And we noticed, like, the craft was silent. There was seemed to be some kind of magnetic field around them, because their hair wasn't even blowing in the wind, which seems quite strange when they were flying through the sky like that. But this was my first experience of this sort of thing, and I never forgot it. Although, I was like, when am I going to see another one of these? And I never have. So, half century goes by and you never see another one. You say, that must have been something pretty extraordinary. So I've since kind of decided these were probably two humanoids. And who knows what race or species they were with, but they were just flying through the sky. And it was a beautiful thing, it was just a very beautiful thing. And I never forgot it. And I said, this kind of proves to me there's more going on here than meets the eye. Now, the other experience, which has really seemed to resonate with a lot of people, had to do with when I was living in Australia. I lived there for 3 years. And at one point, I was on a holiday and lived in Melbourne, but had holidayed out in Perth, which is quite some distance. And after the week's holiday or 2 weeks, whatever it was, on the way back, it's a long drive. So just at random, I pulled the car off the road down a road that led down to the seaside. And I said, I'll take the afternoon off and relax because I had a whole another day's drive ahead of me. So I set up camp and just started relaxing, as I say, and I went off exploring. I'm a big collector of shells and rocks and things of interest like that. And I happened to notice a cave, and it was a very low entrance to it, but I kind of got down on my knees and looked in, and there was sunlight inside the cave, which I thought was interesting. So it was low tide. I figured, all right, when there's high tide, this is probably a blowhole that you see sometimes around the ocean. But tide was low enough. I felt safe enough. I crawled into the cave. And once inside, I found this oblong stone, which had like crisscrossing bands on it. And it was a fascinating stone, very heavy, about as long as my forearm. And I figured at the time, I just assumed this was a natural formation, which had been rolled in the surf for millenniums, perhaps, certainly centuries, I figured. And it was really cool stone. So I took the stone with me rather innocently. Yeah, and I say that because there are Aboriginal artifacts all around Australia, and it is actually illegal to take any of them from wherever you happen to find them. Now, it was a while before all of this started working itself out, what exactly was going on. So I took the stone, next day drove home to Melbourne, brought the stones and the shells and all the camping gear inside the house. I had the stone, among other things, in the bedroom, took a shower, sat back on the bed with a book, and started reading. Well, at one point, I happened to look up and noticed that the room was filled with mist up around the ceiling. And there was this green Chinese lantern shade hanging from a suspended bulb in the middle of the room. And this mist was especially evident around that Chinese lantern shade. So I was very perplexed by this. I didn't smell smoke or anything like that. So I started wondering about it and looking at it. And then I happened to notice there was a spiral spinning over by the old Victorian fireplace in the room. And it was about as large as, say, my upper body. So it wasn't a small thing. It was a sizable churning spiral of energy, which was only visible because the room was full of mist. Now, at this point, I had not connected this to the stone yet. So this part of the story is interesting as well. For a solid hour, I looked at this spinning spiral and was kind of telepathically communicating with it, wondering about it. I sensed an intelligence there. And at one point, this spiral came forward and it entered me and started spinning around inside of me like it was checking me out, which I didn't find anything fearful about it, but it was curious. And then it backed up and went back to where it had been by the fireplace. So I had a clock beside the bed, so I know it was in excess of an hour that I was looking at this, and I kind of played with the lights very carefully in the room to see if I was just imagining things, if this was some kind of trick of the light or whatever. But no, it was very much there and very impressive. And at one point then, someone started a car outside the house, very close to the house. And that seemed to trigger a certain change in the dynamic. And what happened is that the spiral started crackling and suddenly shot up through the ceiling. And in an instant, an absolute instant, the mist totally cleared out. And the room was just as clear as could possibly be. So I was really, really fascinated and amazed by this. So a few days later, this Australian couple came over and I showed them the stone. As I said, I hadn't yet made a connection with the spiral and the stone, but they looked at the stone. They said, we think this is an Aboriginal artifact. And, you're not supposed to take them for one thing, but I had innocently taken it. But, I was alerted to the idea that this was an Aboriginal artifact. So about a week later, I was out on an afternoon, a Saturday afternoon, going through shops and stuff. And I happened to come across an Aborigine store with boomerangs and didgeridoos and all their kind of Aboriginal art. And there was an Aboriginal lady in the shop. And so I talked to her and I told her about the stone. And she very kindly said, well, I think what you should do is bring the stone to me. I have a friend who's a professor at the university, and he knows about these kinds of things. So he would be able to tell us if that is an actual Aboriginal artifact. So I said, okay, I am curious. I'd love to know. So I brought her the stone, and I didn't hear from her for 2 or 3 days, but then I got a call from her, and she was kind of upset, and she said, I had to give the stone away. And I'm like, well, what happened? She said, well, the professor at the University of Melbourne, he knows about these kinds of things. And he said that it was definitely an Aboriginal artifact. In fact, he said, it's a chiringa, which is a power stone. So he had called the South Australian Aborigine Society and told them about it. And they flew 2 Aborigine shaman to Melbourne to retrieve that stone. That's how important it was to them. So she had been reluctant to give it to them because she said, it's not mine to give, but they said, you give us the stone or we point the bone at you, which in Aboriginal terms, this is a death threat. So that, again, is how important this stone was to them. And so, of course, she gave them the stone. I said, of course, you did the right thing. Absolutely. And that was it. Suddenly the stone was gone and I had like nightmares for a few days. It just hit me at a very deep psychic level or something. But at last, knowing that it was a chiringa, a power stone, I realized this was a being from the dream time who was residing in this stone. And I started doing research and I discovered that there are thousands of spirals etched in rock all around Australia. And this represents beings from the dream time. So the Aborigines believe we come from the dream time and we return to it. So that's their word for what we think of perhaps as the afterlife or heaven, Avalon, Valhalla, whatever name you want to give it, this other plane of existence. And for me, it was a tremendous learning experience where I realized there are discarnate beings. And now the Aborigines would probably say that being had been a human before. As I say, they believe you come from the dream time and you return to it. So that, as I say, that taught me that there are discarnate beings. And I would not have been able to see that being except for the mist, which in retrospect now I'm thinking is like plasma, which is the 4th state of matter. It's there's solids, liquids, and gases, and then there's plasma, which is the finest of all the material states. And in connection to your own society, the ethereal essence might well be like a plasma. So that's just speculation on my part. But,
That's a very interesting story.
For centuries, philosophers and metaphysicians have been talking about the ether. That's what they described it as. So here you are using that term in your own society.
And interestingly, Wayne, the way that we were called the Aetherius Society because the being that first contacted, the cosmic master which first contacted George King in 1954, that was his code name. So he came through and said that he was the master of Aetherius. We found out since that actually this being, this entity, was Dr. King's master.
Oh, wow.
So he was actually put here on Earth. George King was put here on Earth on instructions from the master of Aetherius, and hence the name, the Aetherius Society. Sure. But yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? Because I've often thought in Greek mythology, we've got the fifth element, which is ether, and that's very much accepted as.
Yes. In alchemy, and there's a chapter in my book about alchemy, the quintessence, the fifth essence, as you say. And the alchemists, I believe, although the popular conception is that their objective was to transmute lead into gold or base metals into gold, there's spiritual alchemy, which is also in, like, China had a very similar tradition. And it's about transmuting the base self into a higher level of being, into the gold of the gods, if you will, kind of as a metaphor, but to realize our divinity. And the Aetherium Society talks about transcendence and about the ascended masters and so forth. So that is an allusion also to transcendence and to ascending to higher levels of the self.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still buzzing from your ringing endorsement of the society from someone like you who's written a modern metaphysical classic. I mean, part of our mission with this show, Debra and I, is to fill the gap, because to us it's the society was formed in the 1950s, but it's not this, the theosophy is discussed in occult history, Rosicrucianism, others, but it's not to be not mentioned anywhere when someone like yourself has said that it fits in perfectly with the heritage of the occult heritage. Is to us a great crime. So we're trying to do this to, so that even if people don't become members, at least they know of the Nine Freedoms.
I think it's a very open-minded thing that you're doing, and there could be the perception that something like your society is a cult group. And even at first, when I attempted to access like any information on the society, there was this banner that popped up that said suspicious website.
Wikipedia is not a reliable.
I know, and it's like, okay, what's going on here? So, but I was curious, and I went and I looked on Wikipedia, and after I read everything about it, I said, what's wrong with this? There's not a thing wrong. This is great stuff.
No glamorous gun holdouts with us, but I mean, were you? Because to me, before I joined, the idea of enlightenment is the ceiling. You become a Buddha, and that's game over. Back to God. Here we go. But to know that we incarnate on other planets because that's what they're there for, their classrooms, and eventually the idea that we evolve, our consciousness accumulates back to God. Eventually we form, you and I could be a planet together with a few other souls. Mm-hmm. Eventually a sun, eventually the galaxy is a living being. This is, to me, I haven't read this in any other metaphysical treatise. So it's worth exploring, though.
Yeah, just very much. And I like to think my book, The Journey Across Forever, would maybe resonate with people in these times, like I'm very much a being of my times, a person of my era and so forth, but I have spent my life evolving, and trying to spiritually raise myself to higher levels. And, like a lot of people they reach 30 or so and they're like, okay, I know everything I need to know. This is the way life is. And it's all about who has the most money and the biggest status and all this. And they don't appreciate the finer, subtler spiritual aspects of this life, which, is unfortunate, I think. But we each evolve, I do believe, in our own way and in our own time. So, I don't believe in proselytizing and trying to convert people to anything. Just speak your own truth with conviction. If you're able to really know your own truth, which I think takes many, many years to work it through and see what really you do truly believe and don't believe. But even so, to keep yourself open at all points, right up to the end. The Zen masters say, when you reach the top of the mountain, keep on climbing. I love that idea,
Yeah, well, you've got so many beautiful comments on Amazon, for example. People say it's a shimmering, beautiful piece of work, and metaphysical masterpiece. So yeah, it's very inspiring for our members to, to indulge in the history and to see it through your experiences.
Yeah, that would be good. I think it would to give them, as I say, kind of an intermediate level of inspiration, to read the book. And there's so many aspects and there's so many facets to it. There's adventure stories and there's, I have traveled the world but I've done very intense studying of all the spiritual traditions around the globe. And like the Aetherius Society, it's syncretistic. It's taking the best of each religion, each spiritual tradition, and weaving it into a whole. Like so many religions say it's mine and all the others are wrong and false and all this. But one of the key aspects of the book draws on all these near-death experiences which have occurred in recent years thanks to modern resuscitation methods. And what these near-death returnees are telling us is that no religion takes precedence in the afterlife, that all are equal, that it's just about how good a person you were, how you treated other people, and so forth. In fact, the life review, people often speak of meeting a being of light who brings them to a life review and accompanies them, and in a very non-judgmental way helps them to re-see their life, the life they've just lived, to question whether they might have done things a little differently, a little better, and so forth. But one of the things people invariably say is that not only do they see their life again, but they actually feel everything that they felt during the course of their lives. And in what I think is the ultimate karmic moment, they experience what they made other people feel.
Yeah,
so this is a very, very crucial insight for people to take on board, because how you treat others is the whole key to your evolvement spiritually. And that's what they're telling us, So we should take that wise advice, and I think see it as the new paradigm of the ages. It's a 21st century Aquarian paradigm that I think is very timely and important.
We're told, Wayne, it's exactly as you've described there. We're told that the we go to the halls of self-judgment. We're told that they're actually on Saturn, and we're told that we're actually accompanied by a perfect of Saturn. And one of the the highest beings that we have in our solar system. And that being is not there to judge, it's there to help us see what we've done.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what we want to do next to bring it back into balance. So then we have all that information, which is then all wrapped up when we come back down here again, because there's no point in actually having a book, is there? Because we've got to learn it from the heart. So it's exactly what you've shared, and what the near-death experiences of coming back and telling us. We've got it written down there, as it was transmitted through Dr. King, and that is the type of evidence that suits my simple way of wanting to understand the world. That's good enough for me. It's like coming from enough different directions that and it feels right in my tummy, and that's always good too. That it feels right in my tummy.
And you're so right. A book is great, and reading books is great, but ultimately you do have to live from the heart. You have to really take on board deep empathy for everyone. We tend to be very intellectual about things and think, oh, I'll figure it all out. It'll all be philosophically and intellectually coherent, and then I'll know everything there is to know. But you have to go to the heart. You have to, or you will not reach the higher levels. And that's the beauty of it. So that's totally, again, I resonate with what you're saying, Debra. That's very good.
Practice, Wayne? Do you have like daily practices to help you with your evolution, or?
Well, I do. I get up in the morning ahead of everyone, and I just sit quietly. I don't take on any fancy yogic sitting things at all. I just sit and close my eyes, deep breathing, usually, but just like emptying the mind, or letting the mind thoughts settle down. I don't start getting straight into trying to figure things out, or, we can get caught up in what happened the previous day and all of that, and it can detract. I find that if I just still the mind and body and just sit there, eventually at a certain point, some interesting, inspirational sentence will just pop into my head. And I attribute this to a higher intelligence that's, helping me, being a spirit guide, as they call them, and participating like you're connected to higher intelligence in this way. And if you open up, if you quiet yourself, then it can speak. And if you're into, I think life is about inspiration and novelty and opening yourself up to grow in various ways. And if you just allow yourself just that much, might only be 20, 30 minutes in the morning, but just quiet. We tend to talk too much, all the time, and we're constantly, our mind is full of chatter. So some people call it the monkey mind, or Eastern traditions talk about, the wild animals are basically carrying on in your head, and you have to step back from it. And what I say is be aware of being aware. So you're just one step back from all those thoughts that are flitting through, and they can be like clouds in the sky just passing through. And, where they come from is a mystery. How we're connected to it all is all a beautiful mystery, an amazing mystery. But just open yourself and be a loving person, a kind person, a compassionate person all throughout the day. I'm constantly meditating sort of as I go through my day, in the sense that I'm just open and trying to think the best thoughts that I can think. Take people, try to understand where they're coming from and be empathetic. People are dealing with so much, and as we know, the media's constantly got all kinds of negative, horrible, tragic stories and political divisions, and it's a tumultuous kind of world we live in. Unless you step back from it at times, it can overwhelm you. So that's the Eastern meditational traditions are just beautiful in that way. And Dr. King, he was very much taken with yoga, and yoga has 7 schools that I know of. So there are 7 different types of yoga, but they're all about union with the divine. So it's a very beautiful thing. And you find the one, like your particular yoga might be devotion to a God-like being, or to God as perceived in the Western world and so forth. And others, it's about knowledge. Others, it's about physical agility and, doing the healthy kind of body things, postures and so forth. But I got particularly into dream yoga, and that was what really helped open me up and to teach me really incredible things, which my book is just full of stuff that happened, events and so forth that kind of came from that. So, I think if people are really aware of their dreams, if you're having precognitive dreams on occasion, and I do on occasion have that sort of thing happen, and you're like, it might be very simple. Like you just might have a particular thought and have a particular number in, say, and then an hour later, somebody says that particular number, and you go, didn't I just dream that? And my point is, it kind of is a reflection. It's a very strong suggestion that time is not as linear as we think it is. Because how else could you perceive an event that has yet to happen in your dreams if time was only moving in one direction? So that's a big deal. Again, in my book, I talk about that a lot. And so those are the kinds of things that I'm constantly staying on top of and staying aware of.
Beautiful.
We just did an episode recently on bibliotherapy about how books can be a form of therapy, how they just reading inspirational text, aspirational text, and it seems that your book has all of those qualities. And people can buy it on Amazon. I see available. So, and your website, waynesalmon.com, is a good place to go. Is there anywhere else people could find you or follow you?
Well, I believe Barnes & Noble also has it. The publisher is Collective Inc. in the UK, and formerly known as John Hunt Publishing. So you can buy it on their website, and hopefully it'll be in bookstores soon. So yeah, but definitely Amazon. I'd love to see people buying the book and reading it and then giving their feedback and putting up reviews on Amazon.
Yeah, reviews really
Barnes
help.
and Noble. Yeah, they do. They're a big deal. So I think there's I talk about music as a transcendental medium. I talk about the influences on me, like of the Beatles and Bob Dylan. And so, as I say, the book's got a wide range of topics and intrigue. And I just think it'll make for a very interesting read for those who are into this kind of thing.
Definitely. Nice to read something inspirational like that, and on your other books as well, the storytelling aspect. I don't think you've lost that with your new nonfiction.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. And if people are interested in the Aetherius Society, they can check aetherius.org. And please rate and review this podcast as well.
That would be good.
Thanks for joining us, Wayne.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jack and Debra.
Take care.
I enjoyed it.
Wayne.
You're welcome. All the best to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.